We're standing by. You can see there are live pics coming from the Vatican. Also standing by to hear from the opposition leaders. So both sides are effectively not campaigning in any normal sense today, and Peter Dutton expected to make some remarks. So we'll take you there live once that happens. In the meantime, I'm joined by parish priest Father Richard Leonard to talk to us about the Pope's life and legacy. Thank you very much for your time. The final moments or days of the Pope marked very much by his determination to live for one more Easter, effectively, and however painful it was on his body towards the end, to speak to the world one more time.
It was quite extraordinary, those last couple of days. It was very clear watching him since he got out of hospital that he was very physically unwell, and particularly when he spoke, he was very breathy and clearly he was labouring. But Easter, of course, is the most important feast in the Christian calendar. Easter Sunday, our greatest feast day, and he was a man who wanted to be with the people of God and wanted to bless the church and the world, and so he was prepared to take all those risks. And it would appear he's had a stroke then overnight and died 7:30 a.m. Easter Monday morning, Rome time.
He was often described as a Pope of the people. There are his early days, of course, before he was Pope, riding the subway, even in a very senior position in Buenos Aires. That's just how he liked to travel. And one of his final public acts was actually to visit inmates at Rome's Regina Coeli prison. He was too weak for the traditional washing of the feet, but it was one of the final things he did.
There are quite an extraordinary number of things that he did right at the beginning of his pontificate that when we look back on it now, we start to see it was, he was setting the tone of what the last 13 years was to be. I was in the square. I was teaching at the Jesuits' Gregorian University in Rome when the election was on. I was in the square when he came out on the balcony, and it was an enormous shock to absolutely everybody that Cardinal Bergoglio from Buenos Aires, a Jesuit for the first time, was now going to become the Pope. But the very first trip he did outside of Rome was, in fact, not to go and see the President of Italy or do anything like that. It was to go to Lampedusa, to the island, which was often a place where refugee boats came as they tried to get away from northern Africa to Europe. And then later he would go into that prison to Regina Coeli, Queen of Heaven in Latin, and wash the feet not only of Catholic men, but of Muslims, of people who are atheists or agnostics, are self-described. And so he was a man who started to indicate how inclusive and generous and welcoming he wanted the church to be, and his own ministry was.
And I suppose that goes to the modernity that occurred on his watch. The Pope for the first time had Instagram, more women in key positions, action on climate change is something he urged, tolerance as well for divorced people, tolerance for gay people, but obviously there was a limit there. He did stop short and upheld essentially that there could not be blessings of same-sex unions.
No blessings of same-sex unions, but of same-sex couples, that we could bless them. And I think he made the comment at one stage that if I bless somebody who is the CEO of a company that's doing destructive things to their employees and to the environment, that no one bats an eyelid. But if I bless a gay couple who are living very faithfully their loving vows, then people seem to get worked up. And he really did live by 1 John 1:3, where there is love, there is God. That was the litmus test for this man. And that's why I think people have responded so generously and incredibly to his death. I've had atheist friends of mine contact me today. I've had people who aren't Catholic and people who may in fact be quite angry with the Catholic Church in a variety of different ways for different reasons. And yet they were touched by him. And there was something about his humanity, his compassion, his wanting to include people who lived on the peripheries, who lived on the margins of the church and of society, and advocating for that, passionate about refugees and asylum seekers, passionate about environmental issues. And some people criticised him and said he was trendy and new age. But that would mean the book of Genesis is trendy and new age, because he was simply living out where Genesis says, God says to us in Genesis, that we're to care for the world, not wreck it. And that's what he was anxious about, that we weren't handing on the planet in as good a shape as we had received it. So he really was the face of Christ, this generous, humble, passionate for the poor face that we see in the Gospels, and people responded very warmly to it.
Yeah. Yeah, with always a nod to scripture on his decisions, as you allude to. In the Leonard time, just briefly, obviously, a key part as well was him confronting, if you like, sexual abuse in the church, apologising, asking for forgiveness on behalf of the church, and also new procedures around reporting and even delving into the previous confidential elements. How do you see this part of his legacy?
I think this is one of the most interesting parts of the development of his ministry. At that stage, 13, 14 years ago, as best we know, the sexual abuse, despicable crimes had not surfaced in Argentina in the same way that they certainly had here and in other parts of the church and the world. So he came to this issue, I think, slowly. I couldn't believe the priest could do such despicable and dreadful things and such trauma inflict such trauma on people's lives and their families. So he initially, I think he thought this was a beat up. It was too much. It was the media's agenda. And of course, he started to realise, and I don't think it took too long, he started to realise that in actual fact, this was just a despicable, dreadful crime, and it was systematic. And so he had to change his entire attitude. And he apologised to victims who he had dismissed. He changed the law. He talked about every church cooperating with civil authorities. He was the one who said the papal secret. There was a secret where you didn't tell anybody about this terrible crime if a bishop came across it in their diocese. And this was all uncovered in the Royal Commission, and much to the church's great shame. And so Francis then got with the program and also took the part of many victims. Some personally he stayed in contact with for the rest of the time of his ministry. And he would be calling them and making sure they're okay and reaching out to them. And it was also true that he then said to bishops and priests there was zero tolerance in the church for anybody with who's convicted of pedophilia.
Richard Leonard, an auspicious day. We appreciate your time today. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Tom.